He goes out and he sees all these planes on fire and he runs towards it.
We both stood up, Mom went with us, and we walked right out of that church on that pastor. You talk about the American dream under capitalism.
People don't realize today how these re-education camps, these concentration camps that these communists are known for.
It's for real. I've had people negatively say, how come you're celebrating 9/11? I'm not celebrating 9/11. I'm remembering and not forgetting. Son, if I don't start telling people a little bit about the horror of war, no one will understand why it should always be the last resort.
Hey y'all, thanks so much for joining us back on The Real Rule. Today I have a very special guest. You don't need to look to Hollywood or other places like that to find heroes. Today I'm getting to interview a real life one right here from rural America. So ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome the man himself, Mr. Doug Harbour. Doug, thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, Claire, thanks for having me. This is quite an honor, honey.
Well, I appreciate it so very much, and I have gotten to know you over the years with all your efforts for, reestablishing patriotism amongst our rural communities and beyond. And, that's a huge reason why we're here today, but we're also here to celebrate our veterans. It was Veterans Day this week, and we believe that Veterans Day should not be just a day. It's every day, but it should at least get its whole week. So thanks for joining us here on this special time of year. And, Doug, you have such an amazing story that I know is going to be so inspiring to everyone who hears it. So let's start from the beginning. You served our country. You were a Marine with the 3rd Marine Division in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And you served our country then, and then when you came home, you've also taken on this whole new role, self-imposed service to our nation through all your many efforts with 9/11, honoring our veterans, and so much more. So let's kind of begin at the beginning. Tell me, where were you born? And your family has quite a history of service. So walk us through, kind of the beginnings, and how did you get involved in the service?
Claire, I tell you, my dad and mom were in Pearl Harbor on December 7th of 1941. And when their whole world was turned upside down.
Yeah.
Dad had just dropped Mom off from the date, so it meant they were up pretty late because they got hit, the Japs hit them pretty early in the morning, or about 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning.
That's right.
When Dad got out to Hickam Field, where he was an Air Force or Army Air Corps at that time pilot, he flew P-38s and P-40s.
Wow.
But he got down there, and most all those planes were in rows. They were afraid of sabotage prior to all this, so the Brain Trust had put them all in rows so that when these Zeros came in, they could light them all up on fire, just hitting a row at a time.
Oh my!
But Dad went down, and he said third plane he tried to, that wasn't on fire. He tried to taxi to get it in the air and get it out, to a safe operation. They weren't armed, but he wanted to get it out of there. He was finally able to taxi and get about 10 feet in the ground, and a Zero came in and put him down and burned his hands pretty bad, but at any rate, he lived through all that.
So, not to stop you there, so Pearl Harbor, your mom and dad are on a date.
Yeah.
Your dad drops off your mom.
Yeah.
And Pearl Harbor happens minutes or an hour.
It was all going on right then, it all started right as he dropped her off, apparently, just right within 30 minutes then.
And so he goes out, because he was a pilot with the Air Force, and he goes out and he sees all these planes on fire, and he runs towards it.
Well, see, he pulled in, he told me he pulled into the barracks where he was staying and saw all the smoke, but he thought the Navy was smoke bombing them. They used to do that back and forth, the kind of training and stuff. And then as he was going, he said that when he went into the barracks, a huge piece of shrapnel came shooting through the building, or through his room right there. And he dawned on him, this is for real. So he went hauling down to the runway down there where all the planes were. And that third one he was able to taxi out and get up in the air before he got shot down. So,
Jeez.
At any rate, Mom I have a little clipping, Claire, of her. It was from a newspaper from Erie, Pennsylvania. That's where she was raised. She was from Pennsylvania. Dad was from Texas.
Okay.
And this clipping says Bobby Harbour was on the last transport when they were taking all the civilians off of Hawaii because they thought the Japanese were going to invade it. She was on the last transport, and she's going to go live with her new relatives in Coleman County, Texas. So I got a clipping of that somewhere of that. That's kind of
Wow.
neat. So their lives started over there together, and they've both passed. And we buried Dad and Mom at the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific there in Hawaii. You know, and it was really fitting when we had Dad's funeral. Some of these little stealth fighters came right over, and I thought Dad would have loved to have seen that, man. You know, that was really cool. But anyway, we have a history of that.
Yeah.
Dad, all of his other three brothers all served in World War II. And his Uncle Bill, or my Uncle Bill, his brother Bill, was flying with the Chenault's Flying Tigers, and it was after they had been absorbed by the Army Air Corps.
Okay.
And his plane got shot up over Burma on the other side, flying into China for you know, when Chenault and them were working that area. And his plane, coming back, the navigational officer made an error at any rate, it took him longer to get into that runway than it normally would have. And Bill's plane went down short of the runway about 20 miles before he was able to taxi it in. And he bailed out, and a part of the plane clipped him and killed him. And I met my Uncle Bill at the Coleman County Cemetery in Texas down there when I was down there turkey hunting with a cousin of mine.
Wow.
Yeah.
Such a amazing legacy of service in your family. Your mom and dad, their story started in Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. Your dad survived the war.
Yeah, he ended up as a ace pilot. He had, I think it was 5 confirmed and 8 probable kills with his, so I have his name, Uncle Bill's name, and one of my
squad leader.
Squad leaders.
There you go.
I got him on the wall up here at our memorial we built.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and we're going to talk about that memorial
Sure.
that you have built to honor our paramedics, our first responders, our police officers, and also all of our fallen soldiers as well.
Sure.
But take us back. So you were born December 26th, 1944.
Yes, ma'am.
The war is still going on,
Right.
World War II,
Right.
where your mom and dad met, and your dad was an ace pilot. And he flew which planes again?
P-38s and P-40s. I think it's the P-40. One of them had that dual tails, you know.
Yeah.
And that was one of the ones that he flew over
Okay.
there.
So, you grow up and you're in this household where, your uncle was a brave hero in the war. Your parents as well served heroically during the war of World War II. So take us to where your service kind of starts. You were, as I was kind of told before we, started filming today, that you were kind of in college and a little bit of maybe a rambunctious type, maybe not. Walk us through how you decided to, so fast forward, I believe we're in the 1968 year.
Yes, you bet. Yeah.
And you sign up to go to Vietnam. How did that all come about that you decided to go sign up to go?
Yeah, it's kind of a hard story to admit to. I think I was having a little too much fun at Northeastern Junior College in
We
Sterling.
won't tell any secrets.
Okay.
We won't tell any secrets.
At any rate, I came home from that semester, and it was Christmas time, and my grades were pretty iffy. And by that time, I don't know if they had instigated, I don't think they had instigated the draft yet, but I thought, with all things were going, I went ahead and I went down and I volunteered for the draft. I thought, just draft me and I'll get this over with, because I had a hunch that I was going to get called anyway. any rate, I waited a couple of months, Claire, and nothing came on a draft notice. So I went down, and they had all the recruiters were lined up in little offices in this one building. And I went and met with 2 or 3 of them, but the one that impressed me the most was the Marine Corps when he told me, he said, if you want out of here, I'll have you in San Diego by this evening.
My goodness.
He said, we'll get you to Denver, get the physical, and if you pass the physical, you'll be, and he was right. I was in San Diego that evening. My folks were a little concerned when I came home and told them, hey, Dad, you're in the Air Force. I'm going to be in the Marine Corps. And they were supportive of all this.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll tell you just one little story. When I came back from Vietnam, the reception wasn't real good for a lot of us, you know. Mm-hmm. And I was visiting the folks, and they were living in Florida at that time. Mm-hmm. And I went down there. Dad was a career. He was a full colonel in the Air Force. Mm-hmm. When he had a heart attack, and they medically retired him, you know, in I think 1960. But at any rate, we went to this church service, and this pastor started being pretty negative towards Vietnam and started making some statements there that were totally not in support of our government or I looked at Dad looked at me, and we both stood up. Mom went with us, and we walked right out of that church on that pastor. Wow. You know, it was not right.
No.
And saw, you know, in fact, when that first night I came back, I'll go through with the Vietnam part of it.
Yeah.
Okay, I went to boot camp.
Yeah.
And after boot camp, went to ITR, infantry training, and so on.
Okay.
Came back on a little leave and got my orders to report to the Republic of Vietnam. I had to go to, I think it was El Toro, where we flew out of El Toro, went to Hawaii. And I was a little older than most of these guys were 18 or 19. I think I was 21.
Wow.
So they called me, my guys, when I got over there and assigned to this unit, they called me Gramps.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I was Gramps to these guys.
And you're all of 3 years older, maybe.
Yeah, but
21.
It was amazing that over there, every one of my promotions were meritorious. I figured it out is if you do your job as best as possible, mm-hmm. you can accomplish it sooner, better, and everything else. And I remember when we get ready for an operation where they're saying, hey, saddle up, we're going out, we'll be leaving in an hour. Yeah. And they bring cases of C rations, so real nasty old C rations. And I mean, most of them were okay, but the ham and lima beans, they were the only one I ever saw when you try and give it to a Vietnamese kid, he'd throw it back at you. They were nasty. They were really nasty. But at any rate, when I'd get these cases, I ended up real quickly moving up to the ammo corporal under our sergeant right there. Mm-hmm. And it was one of my jobs was disperse all this stuff before we'd leave on an operation. They'd chop us out in the jungle somewhere and drop us off at a fire base, and then I was with 81 millimeter mortars, and those are they're about that big around, and we'd fire support mostly, but there were times when we call hump everything. We go out with the grunts and move to a whole nother position, and that mortar could be broken down from the base plate in a couple pieces, and then the sight, and the tripod, and the tube. Okay. So each one of us in the squad would get a piece of that mortar, and then we'd pack 3 of these rounds that weighed about 12 or 15 pounds apiece on top of our pack too. Mm. And we'd hump these things to wherever the new position set up, and then we'd get resupply, and they'd bring cases of ammo and whatever we needed in there at that time.
So you sign up in '68, you volunteer, whereas a lot of guys were drafted, and you show up to Vietnam. What was your first, do you remember kind of what you first thought when you showed up?
Well, when we flew, we initially refueled in Honolulu. Okay. When we landed on the ground to refuel, they said anybody that's 21 and older, where you've got 45 minutes or an hour, you can go to the bar. So myself and 2 or 3 other guys went to the bar and drank about as fast as we could, as many as we could, before we got back on the airplane. Went from there on over into Vietnam, and we landed at Da Nang. As we were coming into Da Nang, it was at night, and I had just seen one of John Wayne's movies. And I shouldn't have ever, because when we're coming into Da Nang, looking out that window, you could see it looked like fires everywhere. And what it was, is guys were just popping illumination rounds up around the perimeter of that big city just to make sure nobody's trying to infiltrate it and come on in.
Okay.
So but I didn't know that. It
Right.
was like, holy moly, there's fires going everywhere.
You think the place is all on fire already, and you haven't even got there.
We land, and then they assign us to various units. I get this unit, I get on this deuce and a half, one of these military trucks that we use in the parade here. There's 6 or 8 of us. They're moving to this new company. But at any rate, when we pulled into that new compound where these guys were all set up at, as we got out of that deuce and a half, we had to help load 6 or 8 body bags back in it to take it back over to the airport. That was a real eye-opener right there, But anyway, I was there just for a month with with that unit, because they were out of Hawaii and were never even, they had gone on a maneuver and ended up over there, and they weren't even supposed to be there, but I'd been there about a month.
Wow.
And we received orders that they were going to head back to Hawaii, and we were just super excited. Yeehaw, we're going to get out of this place early. They took the flag, and they took the short timers, the guys that were just due to rotate out. And the rest of us, they sent us up to Quang Tri, which is right on the DMZ. It's the first city underneath the demilitarized zone.
Yeah.
North Vietnam was up there about, I think, 5 clicks or 7 clicks, or not too far. So that was our base. And when I arrived, it was right towards the tail end of the Tet Offensive that was going on, and things were not calming down a little bit, but it was still kind of hairy. But at any rate, my first station after I was assigned to 3-3, the 3rd Meridian Division and H&S Company, I got on a chopper with some guys, and I was choppered up to this Dong Ho Mountain, which was over kind of within range of Khe Sanh, where they had been pinned down, all those Marines had been pinned down for, I don't know, weeks up there, and fire support suppressed all the NVA. If I had a choice to participate in a war, down south down there where I saw that when we loaded those body bags, they had a lot more of the black pajamas and guerrilla warfare and these punji pits and all these, stuff like that. Whereas when I got up to Quang Tri and worked with, up in that area, that was all we were fighting, strictly the North Vietnamese regular army that was coming across the DMZ and coming down that Ho Chi Minh Trail and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And
wow.
It was just I preferred that. At least you kind of knew who you were, what you were up against.
You knew who you were, you knew who the opposition was, and it was not so many tricks and all that.
Booby traps,
Yeah. Well, so walk us through, we've started this podcast because unfortunately so many people don't understand rural America, but so many folks don't understand the history of even the Vietnam War, and they don't understand what Marines like you did over there. So talk.
Well, partly I went in, and I still firmly believe that it was to suppress communism.
Amen.
And because it was leapfrogging across a lot of those little countries in Southeast Asia, and it was, that was the initial draw. I thought, I could help my country.
Amen. Amen. Yeah. And that's, communism is, such a misunderstood.
People don't realize that. I have a younger brother that doesn't realize that, when we left Vietnam, in my mind, there's no doubt. I mean, I sat up one time we guarded this little bridge that was going across this creek on the way up to the DMZ. And it was all, of course, all Vietnamese, and there was no papasan, no old guy there. And when we'd get resupplying, I'd give him the wooden cases. A lot of our ammo came in, and he was making a picket fence out of it.
Wow.
And he had his kid bring me some fish hooks. And they were weird. They didn't have an eye in them. They just were rounded flat end, and you tied your line around that. I loved to fish. And I'd sneak down and catch some fish down in that river. I'd give them to those guys. But there was a relationship, and it was a good relationship.
Yes.
But when we left there, anybody that helped us, a mama son that did our laundry, well, we didn't have him do our laundry, but the guys in the rear did. And this papa son that had that picket fence, any village chief either was killed or had to go to relocation camp or re-education camp. I met a young Vietnamese a few years, about 10 years later, that after Vietnam fell, he spent 4 years it's essentially a concentration re-education camp with his family and all these others, barbed wire all around him. He and his buddies at night found a way. There was 3 of them that would they got under this barbed wire fence and went it was along the coast up to a cove, and they built a boat. It took 3 years, and then one night they all hit families. 3 of these guys and their families snuck out and got on that boat and floated in the South China Sea until somebody picked them up, and they ended up in, I don't know, one of the other Southeast Asia countries. And he knew of an American that he had befriended, and he was able to give him that name. And in essence, he comes to America in California, nothing on his a pair of shorts and some flip-flops. That's what he has.
Yeah.
And he gets in, and his family's still over at that other country, but he was able to use this name to sponsor him. So he comes over here. This kid learned English. He said, the first thing I knew I needed to do is learn, instead of this pidgin English we communicate, regular English. And he met a lady at a church that helped him get started with the YMCA and some other stuff. He ended up with his master's degree, and he was had a technical ability. He came in, I was working at Prowers Medical Center here in Lamar, and we had one of our big blood chemistry machines go down. They sent this kid clear out from California, and I don't know, and he worked and fixed our machine. And you talk about the American dream under capitalism.
People don't realize today how these re-education camps, these concentration camps that these communists are known for.
It's for real. I mean, these people are, they care. The human life means nothing to them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the government and in control. They just want total control.
Amen.
And,
Well, so, all right. So just one more question about your job in the Marines. I've heard enough about it to know that you really carried the mail. And so tell us about the gear you guys had to wear and having to be in these helicopters, and these pilots were having to do some pretty, as I understand it, they were having to really maneuver.
well, they do corkscrews coming into a fire base.
Tell us about that.
Well, somebody go in.
You guys are in the back of the chopper.
Yeah.
With what?
Before all that,
Okay.
they'll jets or something or bombers will go in and blow the top off of a mountain top, a little hilltop, and then they'll chopper some guys in there to fix a perimeter up real quick, and then we start coming in.
Okay.
And then when we land in there, we set up perimeter all the way around there to make sure, and we'd have the high ground and stuff, and then we'd send out patrols. That's some of the time. Sometimes they just our truck us in somewhere and dump us out and then we just move out. But our gear, we had a backpack with any personal gear and little letter writing stuff. And other than that, we get these sea rations, like I was going to say, these nasty old sea rations. I'd turn them upside down and mix them up, and then I'd have the guys come over and each one of them get however many days we thought we were going to be gone worth of these sea rations. And the ones I felt sorry for when if they got 3 or 4 canned and of those lima, ham and lima beans ones, they were gross. But at any rate, you load that stuff in, and then we either had a rifle or a pistol, and then our 81 millimeter mortar.
Yeah. So you're in the back of these choppers. Talk to us what it was like to be in there and to be on this bird that was doing all these evasive maneuvers, trying not to get shot down. Would they land on the ground with y'all?
No, usually not. They corkscrew coming down as fast as they can like that, and all of a sudden somebody's yelling, jump. And generally it was okay, be within 1 to 3 feet off the ground, but you never know. Once in a while it might be 5 or 6 feet off the ground. You got a 60 or 70 pound pack on your back with all that, with the extra ammo and all that stuff in there. That can be traumatic. Oops.
A little hairy to get off of that thing, huh?
Yeah.
Wow. And so, then where would you guys go?
Being with the 81 millimeter mortars, mostly we set up on the perimeter to use that we would be fire support for the patrols going out. And right after we got there, one of those first, stations up there on top of a mountain like that, I remember we got a call one day from the radio started cackling, and there was about 20 NVA that had run into a little clump of bamboo in the bottom of this valley. And we'd taken some casualties earlier than that, and they requested a fire mission. I got the coordinates, and we laid an iron cross of high explosive right across the top of that stuff, and they said nobody lived. We got them all.
Wow. Wow.
And but I tell you what, it can go either way. It's hard to explain. 95% of the time spent over there, you were extremely bored. And it's punctuated by 5% of the time in terror, trying to figure out what the hell you're going to do and, what you had to do and to make things work. And so it was, this fear of or regret of survivorship is a real thing too, some of these things. When you make it through and the guy right beside you didn't and stuff, it makes you wonder why. But I think the good Lord has a reason for all of it,
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you were speaking of that, and, we were kind of discussing at lunch before we started filming here. You have an amazing story regarding one of your squad leaders, a gentleman named Carlos.
Yeah, Carlos Maldonado.
Tell everyone watching that story, because there's so much inspiration through that. Not only, today we all, my age and younger, we all live in this era of social media. We know where everyone is most of the time at any given time, and we know way too much about we know way too much of each other's business. It took you almost 30 years to be able to find out about your squad leader Carlos's fate. So talk to us through that. Okay. What happened to Carlos, and how did you, this amazing story of how did you find out what had happened to him and then reconnected with his family later on?
Let's start out with, we were on the road to Quezon. There was that old bridge I was telling you about where Garden, but if you go about a click further, there was another crossroads, we called it the rock pile. And we were set up with patrols going out from that and fire missions at night and stuff like that with our mortars. And at any rate, one morning, it was early in the morning, the sun had come up and it was still kind of chilly, and we were set up in a big bomb crater. There was a great big bomb crater we're in, and Carlos and his squad were down there, had a little fire going, and were warming up by the fire. And I was corporal then, and I went down to get a head count and a morning count so I could take it up to the company commander that was in a hooch up the way. So I went down and I talked to those guys and turned around and walked out of that bomb crater and took about 4 steps, and it was a Claymore mine went off in the bottom down there. And just a loud, boom and the smoke and the sounds. I went running down there, and three of the guys were hit, or 4, but Carlos was hit worse, and there was a other young Marine too. I never did find out for sure what happened to him, but he was hit pretty bad too. Carlos was moaning, and he had a head wound, a really substantial head wound. And we called for the medevac. One of the Navy corpsmen that were with us actually was from my hometown in Colorado Springs, and he and I went to high school together. We met over there on a hill. Wow. But he came down, and we worked on Carlos and the other guys. We were all there while we waited for the choppers to come in and medevac him. And as we were medevaced, and Carlos went over and over, he was just mumbling, "Mama, mama, mama." But I didn't think he could make it, the way it looked. And any rate, 20 years after that, I'm back from Vietnam. I work at Prowers Medical Center, and I'm a medical technologist. I'd gone back to school. Actually, I started getting good grades. I learned there's a little more importance than partying after a little trip in Nam.
Just a little trip in Nam.
Yeah, a little vacation to Nam. And at any rate, in the course of all those years, there's quite a few Hispanics in this area. And whenever I'd hear the name Maldonado, last name, I'd always ask him if you ever have anybody that served in Vietnam. And always no, Well, at any rate, when my son, I think he was 17, and David was 17, I'd been coaching him from T-ball through senior Babe Ruth. We had a team, good ball, the kids had fun.
Yeah.
We won state championships a couple of times and all that. But at any rate, I'd got a roster of the boys' names and stuff that I was going to have that year. And then I talked to this cousin back in New York, and then he has some vineyards and stuff, and there are a lot of rough mountainside behind there with turkeys on it. So he invited me out to go turkey hunting before this ball season started. So I went to DIA then, flew out of there, and the flight was late getting to Washington, D.C. to catch my next connection to Buffalo, New York. And lo and behold, they put me up in a hotel the next morning early, got a taxi, and asked them to take me down to the Vietnam Memorial. And I went down there, and there's a little gal there with her National Park uniform, Smokey the Bear hat on and stuff. And I said, "Could you tell me where I'd look to find Carlos Maldonado?" And she opened her book up, and she said, "Go to panel 67, line 33 or something." Yeah. And I went over there, and sure enough, there's his name on there. And I took a piece of paper and I scribbled, put it up against that and made them, got his name on that. Spent some time thinking about Carlos, because he was telling me that he, before he got killed, that he had been accepted at Penn State University, and that was where he was going to go as soon as he got out. But anyway, the potential there, what did our country lose, Mm-hmm. But I took pictures of those soldiers and the statues up there and this and that, and then I went out and I killed a big old gobbler with Roy up there in Pennsylvania. Came back, and I made a call to my contact in La Junta, Colorado, for a scrimmage. Before season, I got my guys together, and I said, "Well, let's have a scrimmage." And the guy tells me, he says, "Well, I'm not coaching them this year. I'm going to move down and coach my younger son, but there's a new coach for the older boys, and his name is Robert Maldonado." So I said, "Okay, cool." And he gave me Robert's phone number, and I called him. And we lined up a scrimmage for that Sunday afternoon. And then at the end of the conversation, I said, Robert, did you ever have anybody that served in Vietnam? He said, yeah, my younger brother was killed over there. I said, was his name Carlos? And he said, yeah. I said, with the 3rd Marines? He says, yeah. I said, I was holding Carlos when we medevaced him, you know, and is your mama still alive? And he said, yeah, she is. And I said, well, when we medevaced Carlos, he was just moaning over and over and over, mama, mama, mama.
Mm. Wow. And he was a Southeast Colorado boy?
Well, actually, Robert, I don't know what brought him here. Their whole clan came from South Texas, way down, in fact.
Golly.
I don't know why he came up here. What brought Robert up here? He wasn't from here initially at all. He's passed now, and I didn't ever hear any more from the family. But I was able at that when we met for that scrimmage. I had pictures of Carlos. In fact, there's a picture of a whole bunch of us. It had rained. It was raining like just galore. And all the guys we'd been out in the mountains for 2 or 3 weeks or something, stinking, and so we had a bar of soap everybody's throwing around there trying to take a shower in the rain. That doesn't work very well, let me tell you. But anyway, there's a picture of these guys about half naked with Carlos and a bunch of the guys. That's one of the pictures I gave to Robert, and then there were some other pictures of Carlos too.
Wow.
And I gave all those to the family to have.
What an amazing story that.
Yeah. What's the odds of that?
Yeah, that you both eventually moved, or his family and you both eventually moved to Southeast Colorado, and here 20 years, it took you 20 years for you to be able to truly know what happened to Carlos, but you were there in Washington on a fluke deal with a canceled flight, and then you were going to go turkey hunting in Pennsylvania, the state where Carlos was going to go to college after the war.
That's right.
What an amazing, testimony to how God works things out and how God brings people together. That
He puts everybody on this earth with a job, and either you accept it or you don't, and you do it at the best of your ability.
That's right.
Yeah.
Amen.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so, tell us one last thing that a lot of folks, tell us what Agent Orange is, and tell us how Agent Orange was used over there in Vietnam.
It's a herbicide, and at that time I didn't know anything about it, and all I knew was that it was midway in my tour when I first came in contact with that stuff, but we choppered into a new fire base out in the middle of nowhere, and I told the guys, I said, something's weird. I don't think they're supposed to have winter around here, but everything's dead. All leaves, no trees had any leaves on them and stuff like that. And that was that Agent Orange. And but at any rate, I've had some issues with between diabetes and prostate cancer and a few other things. There's pancreatic enzyme deficiency, and there's a bunch more. But at any rate,
it was just very prevalent over there, and you're walking in it, and it did this damage. And you were only in Vietnam for about 13 months or so?
Yeah, tour was 13 months. And
wow.
And what was neat is that I got a call when I had about 2 or 3 days left in country from Quang Tri, and we were out somewhere out in the bushes, and this officer called in and said, I'm going to come out and give you your re-enlistment speech. I told him, I said, well, sir, only extension I'm going to do is extend my right hand for my discharge paper. You can save yourself a trip.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, one tour, and I tell you, Claire, my heart went out in this desert storm and all the Afghanistan and all this. Some of these poor guys went in 4 or 5 tours. My Lord, and leaving their families and what those people went through. Yeah. And then, it's just, they need to be thanked. And
Amen.
That's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Well, let's talk about that. So you get out of Vietnam and you come back to Southeast Colorado and you live a great, successful life. You're out at the Prowers Medical Center and have your career there. Take me to the year 2011.
Okay.
And we're coming upon, at that time, the 10th anniversary of 9/11.
You bet.
Walk me through what you were noticing in our nation.
Well, what started it, I was, watching TV and press and stuff, and there would be a little blurb about, well, in a few days it's going to be the anniversary of, 9/11. But I think a lot of it has to do with having the family, your mom and dad being Pearl Harbor, because I always called them every, December 7th, because I knew how significant it was. And I was thinking, I've got grandkids now, and they need to remember this stuff.
Amen.
And be able to thank these people that have put so much on the line. And I mean, these first responders, and this just been, well, at any rate, I went down to the courthouse, and the county commissioners, they was able to go in and talk to them, ask them, hey guys, would it be all right if we used the courthouse lawn out here and had a remembrance on September the 11th, and sure. So at any rate, I went out and talked to fire department, police departments, and all various fire departments and stuff all over around. And I tell you, that September 11th, we probably had 20 fire trucks, all polished, and just those guys really worked hard. And we had, Alan Tynes brought his yaks over with red and white blue smoke, and the notables sang Lee Greenwood's God Bless the USA out there, and we just tried to remember and thank these first responders and military for what they do. And then was the start of everything.
Well, and just to fill the audience in, so you started just with an idea, approaching the 10th anniversary of 9/11.
Yeah.
Back in 2011, and you started this 9/11 tribute.
Yes, ma'am.
And from the courthouse steps, it has grown into the grandstands at the Sand and Sage Rodeo Arena, the local rodeo arena here in Southeast Colorado in Lamar.
Yeah.
And you grew this event to not only the grandstand, tribute ceremony, but you grew the event into a parade.
Yeah.
And you have established and grown a 9/11 memorial right here in Lamar, Colorado as well, where you have renowned statue makers. You have such amazing stories with that. So let's get into some of that as well to let folks know, what one person can do to affect patriotism. And I've gotten to know you for the last couple of years now, and the amount of patriotism that I have seen, just this surge, it just seems like it grows year after year after year, and more people are involved. So walk us through what that's been like to get this memorial started, do the 9/11 tribute, and your work.
First, I gotta say, it's other people's ideas that have grown this thing to where it's at. Now we have Fort Carson bringing their 4th Infantry Division marching band in. We've 75 howitzers to fire a 21 gun salute. We have fire trucks from all over southeast Colorado and some from Kansas sometime. We have a parade that's 1.5 miles long. But one thing I want to stress to folks too, I've had people negatively say, how come you're celebrating 9/11? I'm not celebrating 9/11. I'm remembering and not forgetting 9/11 is what this is about. Mm-hmm. And if people will understand that, and then we usually have some deuces and a half Donnie Marsh has out here to put some vets in, and we'll have Grand Marshal. We have a Grand Marshal for every year. I got to tell you some of those guys.
Let's hear it.
Okay.
Crack that open.
All right. Remember when the Granite Mountain fire took place down in Arizona and those 18 or 19 young firefighters burnt to death down there? Right after that happened, I saw in an article, a little statement or somewhere, that this one young fireman named Wade Parker was going to LCC here, playing baseball. And he had left the LCC to be a fireman. In fact, the story I got told was that he went to Coach and said, "Coach, if I have the potential to really go on, tell me so, but tell me, be truthful. If you don't think I do, I want to go home and be a fireman like my dad." At any rate, he went home to Arizona and he got burned up in that fire. I got hold of his mom and dad and said, "We would love to honor the memory of Wade as our Grand Marshal for this year." And we were able to talk to a few donors that did not want to be recognized, that we set two $1,000 scholarships up in Wade's name for Christian baseball players that year. And Wade's mom and dad came out to the ceremony, and that's one of them. One day I got a phone call from a lady in, I think it was Iowa. She says, "I understand you folks in Lamar remember 9/11. I said, "Yes, ma'am. We sure do." And she says, "My younger brother was killed on the second plane that went into the towers." Oh, I says, "Well, I'm so sorry. Tell me about your brother." She says, he was a colonel in the Air Force. He had graduated, Colonel Ed Jones, from Wichita. That's where he went to high school. Went to the Air Force Academy, graduated with honors there, went on to MIT, had his master's degree, and was in aeronautical engineering, and was slated to be on the next flight of the Challenger. Wow. And she said, "We have records from the tower closest to there where they'd known what was going on, because that first plane had already hit and theirs was hijacked. He had sent a request for them to scramble any available armed jet and to shoot their plane down before it hit the tower, but they couldn't get there in time."
Wow.
Yeah.
And he was one of your grand marshals of
He
the
was
9/11 parade.
His sister and her husband and another couple came out, and that was neat. We put Colonel Jones's picture up on the side. We have the 9/11 fire truck here in Lamar that was at the Pentagon on 9/11. And there's I'll tell you that other story on that in a minute.
Yeah.
But at any rate, we put Wade's picture on each side of that, and his sister and those other folks rode in a yellow Mustang right behind the big fire truck with all that. And I tried to get them to ride in the fire truck, but they wanted to ride in their Mustang.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
There's another one. There's this I get word of this 97-and-a-half-year-old gunnery sergeant named Alvin Cephas from Eads. I found out that Alvin was in Tarawa and Tinia, two of the bloodiest battles in all of World War II. Those Marine Corps units had suffered 80% casualties on those islands when they were attacking. I mean, it was just meat grinder. I mean, the surf ran red with American blood. And at any rate, his son, that day of our event, came up to me as I was helping his dad get up on where we were having our ceremony. And his son tells me, Dad would never talk about what he saw during World War II until about 5 years ago. And then one day he came up to me and said, "Son, if I don't start telling people a little bit about the horror of war, no one will understand why it should always be the last resort." That was profound, what that man told his son.
Amen.
Alvin, what was neat, when we were sitting on the stage up there, Alta Vistas, those little charter schools, third graders, marched in front of us. They had their little recorders, Claire, that you've heard them. They're kind of like a flute that they're not in tune and they're pretty iffy. Those little kids did a rendition of Johnny Comes Marching Home Again on that beautifully. And I looked over to Alvin and he had 2 tears coming down his cheeks.
Yeah.
That was my welcome home too.
Yeah.
This is why we do what we do.
That's right. Amen.
Yeah.
So many people don't understand the true consequences of war.
Yeah.
And they don't understand, what it's like to be a person like yourself, to go over there and to live and survive what you survived, and be able to come back home and piece together a life and live that life. And then you have taken on this extra service.
Well, it took quite a few years to be in between.
Yeah.
But right after that first courthouse lawn ceremony or remembrance, I'll tell you what happened is it put everything into a sharper focus for me. But on January the 9th of 2011, I lost my little grandson, a little 8-year-old, in a hunting accident. It was a terrible, tough time. By far the toughest that I've ever had to deal with. My son and his wife were the strength that helped me. We all got through this. At any rate, I have been in, working in that hospital situation a lot of times, and seeing the commitment from the first responders and these EMTs and stuff, what they have to deal with. It takes special people. And, to be able to deal with that, they need to be thanked too.
Amen.
Yeah. And all in all, after that, I have tentatively kind of told myself that I want what we do from that point on to be little Reese's legacy. That his death resulted in a positive outcome for a lot of people, and a way to thank a lot of people having a positive.
Amen. Absolutely. So walk us through the start of the memorial.
Okay.
I call it affectionately the Memorial on the Curve.
Yeah, you bet you are at the Lamar curve.
The Lamar curve. Yeah. We're going to put a picture up in the on the podcast for those watching on video, but it's a beautiful tribute to our first responders, to our military. Talk us through how that started and how did that come together? Bring us to where we are.
It's just been amazing. The old adage, it's like eating an elephant, one bite at a time.
Amen.
Well, I tell you, to just be where it's at was I thank the man upstairs on that. I had been talking with the city about putting this whole concept of a memorial came up, and I thought, we got to do this. This would be fun. We need to do this. And I initially was going to put it right next to the ball fields down there in the corner on 287 across from the college, and had it lined up with something. One of the city surveyors was saying that there was too many water lines and drainage problems and this and that. And I was getting frustrated, and it went back and forth. And then there was an offer for us to make it at this across from the middle school at the Bicentennial Park. But there's no parking. People could wave at it if you went by, but that'd be it. So I'm sitting there all frustrated, and I can't remember who I was talking to, but somebody tells me, says, and this is what's neat about other people's ideas. They said, didn't the county just take over 287 at the museum where that little corner of that property comes in? Isn't that county property now? I said, I don't know, I check. So I went down and found out, and I talked to the county commissioners, and I ended up signing a 25-year easement with them to build a memorial there. And it was just a sloping hill coming down there from the museum, nothing there. And it took lots of loads of dirt to bring it up to where we could even start working on it. And I tell you, this community is just a phenomenal community. And all in all, the El Palmar Foundation, Home Depot was amazing. I mean, I made a lot of runs to various places and did a lot of talking. Bill Hibble, who was the head of the El Palmar Foundation, I consider what an honor. I sat in the room in La Junta where he was coming through. I got a call from his secretary saying Bill would be able to meet you there. And at any rate, he had been ambassador to the United Nations at one time and the head of all of the U.S. Olympic Committee. And I'm sitting there talking to him. I explained what I'm wanting to do. And after a half an hour, he said, well, I've got to get going on to Kansas. He was going to visit some relatives. But he said, I'll have you a check for $10,000 in the mail next week to help you get started.
Oh, my. Wow.
Yeah, and it just grew and grew and grew. And Home Depot, all that elaborate brick that's the foundation of the whole thing, they donated that. Truckloads of this stuff came down. We have people from La Junta that helped immensely. We all over here. And I've tried to, when we were building the retaining wall around the whole thing, I had some high school kids and kids out to help carry some of those bricks, so they had ownership in this thing.
Amen.
And I've tried to put as much ownership in it as possible.
Yeah.
It just, the local Elks people, my golly, that big flag, our big flagpole, they paid for that whole thing.
Wow.
You know, and
My goodness.
I don't know, but at any rate, it was one step at a time. I wanted to cross out there, and I didn't want to get in political, somebody squawking about having a cross. So I thought, there's an easy solution to that. The Fireman's Maltese cross goes around the base of the whole blasted thing.
Wow.
I've got my cross out there that way.
Yeah. Well, walk us through, one of the final projects that you're working on finishing. Over the years, you've added little by little into some of those things at the memorial. But you've taken on this latest project that you're about to complete, I believe, next year.
Yeah.
That is a statue project, and it's going to be a total of 3 bronze statues.
Right.
And as we were talking at lunch today, not to give away any of your secrets, but there's going to also be a plate underneath all of the bronzes with you don't have to share what's going to be written there, but it's going to be a phrase to just memorialize all of the bronze statues. So walk everyone through, what are the statues, how did they come about, and kind of give us that.
The first statue we've put up was of a fireman. He's in a Field of Dreams pose. He's coming out of the wall. He's partially in the wall, partially out of the wall, and he's looking up with that, I don't know what I'm getting into, but I'm going to head in anyway. Look. At any rate, that was our first statue. And then initial concept was to have a fireman, a law enforcement, and a soldier. All this would be our 3 statues out there, one to depict each one of the services that we're remembering.
Yes.
And at any rate, I had committed, Scott Stearman is our artist, and he's out of Oklahoma City. Scott's a tremendous artist. I'm so fortunate to have, I found him because I was at a little auction that the Elks were having, and there was a small bronze thing about 18 inches tall of an imprint of 2 boots next to a rifle that's stuck in the ground with a helmet on it. And I saw that and it was powerful. And at any rate, I tried to buy it, but when they found out what I was doing, they gave the darn thing to me. But I found out it was Scott Stearman was the artist. I contacted Scott Stearman, expressed what we were doing, and our concept has morphed all the way along the years a little bit. Things change and other ideas supersede and stuff. But at any rate, I'd contacted Scott to do the law enforcement. And these things are running close to around $30,000 a piece. So these things they're not cheap, but it's going to be something forever that are going to be out there. And at any rate, at a committee meeting, I think it was Donnie or one of the people there at the committee says, meanwhile, let me step back a little bit in time.
Sure. Yeah.
I got a call from Billy Dallin, a rancher just east of town. This was before last year in about, I don't know. Anyway, he says, a friend of mine's coming in from New York and he's offered to help you with your 9/11. I said, great, what's his name? Is Will, and he says, Will Jimeno, Jimeno. I said, all right, tell me about Will. He said, well, when the towers came down, they found 2 survivors 13 hours later that they dug out of the rubble. Will was one of those 2 guys. And at any rate, he's coming out bow hunting. I said, well, cool. And he gave me Will's phone number back, and he lives in New Jersey. He was with the Port Authority. At any rate, I called Will. And I said, I really appreciate your offer. I said, "What would you like to do?" And he said, "I can't do a lot, but I can talk." And I said, "Would you talk to our area kids?" He said, "I'd love to." So at any rate, I went to our community center and we booked that thing, and it holds 1,500 kids or people. I went to our BOCES, and that's the local schools, to all the superintendents for this area.
Right.
I told them about Will coming in and invited them to come, bring their kids. And it was a weekday because that was real nice because they were going to have school that day. Any rate, I gave them the history of Will, a little flyer and this and that. And about 3 or 4 days later, I got my first phone call. It was from Plainview. That school, I don't know what the attendance is, but it can't be very many. Any rate, this gal says, "We're wanting to let you know we're coming. There's going to be," I think they said, 6 kids and 4 staff. I said, "Okay, cool." And then Springfield or Campo and Walsh and everybody started calling, and my golly, we filled that thing. We filled it, and I didn't know it, but at the time I felt bad. I got to the nitty where it's just a few days off, and I hadn't heard anything from Wiley. That's the only school around I hadn't heard anything. So I drove out there and I asked them, I said, "Are you guys coming?" Well, when I met with BOCES, there's all these people sitting in there, these principals and superintendents and stuff. But apparently Wiley's not a member of their BOCES. They're a member of the Lahana BOCES. So they didn't even know anything about it. And I felt terrible. I wish I'd known that. But at any rate, but we filled that, and Will gave the most amazing speech. He talked for over an hour, close to an hour and a half, and those were middle schoolers and high school kids. And there wasn't one phone out, Claire. There wasn't, these kids weren't yakking or goosing each other or not.
Yeah.
They were absorbed. Some of them were crying.
Yeah.
And I tell you, it was powerful. I mean, they learned a heck of about 9/11. It's once in a lifetime opportunity to view that.
Amen.
Yeah, that was amazing. But anyway, about a week after, or later on after that, when I had a committee meeting and I had contracted with Stearman to do the statue, somebody says, "Well, I wonder if we could use Will as the subject for the statue." And I said, "Well, I don't know. It may cost more." And I called Stearman. I said, "Well, it costs me more if we do a particular person versus if we just make it generic." He says, "No, it doesn't be about the same." He said, "Be the same." I said, "Well, okay." So I called Will, and I says, "Will, would you mind if we used you as a subject for our statute that's of the first responder of the law enforcement?" He says, "Well, I'd kind of like to see the artist's work before I commit." And I couldn't believe it. So I sent him a picture of the fireman that's up on the wall, and immediately got a text back from him, said, "Yeah, you can do it." So then when Will came out bow hunting, Stearman met with him over at Donnie Marsh's, and I tell you, he took measurements from the corner of the eye to the nose to this, and hundreds of pictures. And that first responder, that law enforcement, that's Will.
Yes.
And then he came out for that unveiling of his statue for this year, and that was really neat.
I got to be there at that ceremony and to watch, and I also got to hear Will spoke again this year, and I got to hear his story. And, what an amazing opportunity that this community got to hear from the lived experience of someone who was right there, literally in and trapped in ground zero for hours and hours, and everything Will endured to survive. And what an amazing blessing that was for our community to see him firsthand, but also on the same token, what you're allowing our viewers to hear from your firsthand experience of lived experience in Vietnam and everything you've done ever since then for this community. And so tell us about the third statue, if that's not top secret.
No. I got to thinking that the perfect person to be recognized on this is a young man named Bryson Skimahorn. Bryson was in the service he was in the Army when 9/11 happened. And he was deployed over to Kuwait, when that first push into Kuwait and all that nasty uranium tipped projectiles, and all those burn pits were going and stuff. Any rate, he did his tour over there and came back in a year or two, a few years later, came down with a real virulent form of cancer, and I think he was 27, and it just ate him up. And at any rate, local boy, under what he went through, and his folks, or his mom is just a tremendous lady, and a family. And at any rate, I thought Bryson should be on the wall. So he's the one that Scott's working on right now. The story, what happened is that I have been trying to get hold of T2T, Stephen Siller, or Frank Stiller, forever. But that's a huge organization, and those people, Frank does not take a salary. They're buying old, huge hotels and converting them for homeless veterans, and picking up mortgages for young widows with young kids and stuff. I mean, it's amazing work that they're doing. And I support them 100%. But anyway, I've been trying to get hold of them to try and work some kind of a relationship. Well, anyway, out of the clear blue, Will called me and said, hey, I know you've been trying to get hold of Frank. He said, I'm going to be doing some commercials with him. I've told him about what you guys are doing in Lamar, showed him pictures of the memorial, and they'd like to talk with you. So, wow. So I called his executive secretary and expressed how tickled I was to be making this phone call, and that we just had one simple request, and our request was just the fireman, the way he is coming out of the wall in that Field of Dreams pose running, is based on the saga of Stephen Siller. That morning, Frank on September 11th of 2001, Frank and his brother, and I think there was another brother, they were going to go golfing when the towers got hit. And Stephen was a fireman, a firefighter, so he grabbed all his gear and he took off, drove to the closest tunnel to the tower down there, and they were evacuating everybody, so no vehicles could go on. So he put his approximately 7-pound pack with all his gear on it, ran 2 miles under that Hudson River, clear over the towers, and then died when the towers came down. And that's why that T2T.org was founded. Frank set that up in his brother's memory.
Yeah.
What a guy. But at any rate...
so you called Frank and asked him if the firefighter statue, which is the first one at the 9/11 memorial you've got, if you could put that in memorial to his brother.
Yeah, and put Stephen's name underneath it.
And he, of course, said...
Yeah, I got the neatest email about a week later, said he's honored that we're doing all this and that he has our complete permission, and he would like to come out, if possible, when we have the formal dedication. If not, he'll send some representatives out from T2T.org. And that'll be first Saturday closest to September 11th next year.
You know, Doug, it's just so astounding, that you are putting these real heroes on this wall and these real statues. You could have taken the easy route of just kind of making a generic statue and to represent each of these, but what an amazing...
Well, it's for him. It's amazing how this all works. I didn't plan it. I get in trouble, Claire, when I think things need to work on my timetable.
Yeah.
When I need something really important to get solved or done, if I just back off, if it's supposed to happen, it'll happen.
Yeah.
And when it's supposed to.
Yeah.
Instead of me getting a lot of anxiety and worried about. Yeah.
Well, it's amazing what you've done, and I know I speak for our entire community and beyond. You have touched so many lives, just not only here in Southeast Colorado, but all over the country, with your efforts to promote patriotism, to remember what happened in 9/11, to not let that go by the wayside, and to honor, fellow veterans, and to honor those that never came back, and to honor our first responders in a way that I think is very rare, that very few, although people do, but it is few that people like yourself are out there promoting this. So thank you for all you've done.
Oh, you betcha. Can I throw a shout out for Quilts of Valor?
Oh, you bet.
I better do that. I get in trouble.
No, you won't. I'll be getting in trouble. They'll be like, "What are you doing?"
No, I'll tell you what, it's a few years ago, your mama came up to me and said, would it be possible to award some Quilts of Valor to some older veterans? They're on their kind of last days. And at the formal ceremony that we have out there at the fairgrounds. And I, like I told her, I said I was not reluctant, but I was kind of wondering how this is going to work.
Sure.
But it was such a positive presentation, those beautiful quilts given to those gentlemen, and watching the reaction from the fans or in the stands and then the families. It's a win-win.
Amen.
And now what's so proud, I'm so proud of what she's got going. I found out from Tila, that all the schools in Vaca County were actually, instead of like we did it this year, we had award some quilts at one of our ceremonies. Instead of that, they're having their schools, kids are volunteering to go interview the veteran, so they do all the write-up of that, and then they hold an assembly in the school where they award the quilts right out of the school, and all these kids are getting a dose of patriotism and love of country that way, man. So we got it in every school in Prowers County this year.
Yes.
Yeah, that's so neat. I mean, but these are the tangents that just work out the way they're supposed to.
Yes, absolutely. So I wanted to pause and explain a little bit more of Doug's involvement in Quilts of Valor in Prowers County and how that came to be and where it is now. And granted, I'm a new podcast host. I don't think I did a very good job getting that explained in the interviews, so I want to attempt to do that here. So several years ago, a couple rural American quilters approached Doug in Prowers County, one of them being Bobby Roblowski and the other being my mom, and asked him if he'd be willing to allow a Quilts of Valor award ceremony in his 9/11 memorial tribute. And Doug agreed. And after that first ceremony, it was such a beautiful award ceremony and such an amazing effort to see all these quilters and to hear the stories of what they went through is truly a moving experience. And ever since then, this whole effort has grown so much so to the point where now the schools are getting involved and this whole event has just blossomed. There is a Quilts of Valor award ceremony in every single school in Prowers County and Baca County, Colorado. And these award ceremonies are no small task. These kids have amazing enthusiasm, wanting to be a part of telling these stories of these veterans. They are so enthusiastic getting to know them, hearing what they did in their service, and creating this ceremony so that they may have a moment to interact with them. The amazing quilters from all over in these rural counties have come together and make these gorgeous, very thoughtful, love-filled quilts that are presented to our veterans. And while so many in this nation may think there is a huge divide between the young and the old, I can tell you through firsthand accounts that that divide or that gap is severely narrowing. Our kids want to understand what those men and women did who came before them. They're honored to get to have a piece of time with them and to have a moment with them, to hear what they went through and to be able to honor them for it. Earlier, when the standing ovation was going on, that was an organic standing ovation started by the students of that school, and that was in Lamar High School. All of these kids are yearning to be a part of something bigger than themselves, and our veterans represent that. I can tell you from my own experience, getting to hear the stories of these veterans, getting to see the quilts that these precious women from rural America make for our brave heroes. It is one of the most moving things I've ever seen. And now, getting to watch our high schoolers, our middle schoolers participate in these ceremonies, participate in getting to know the men and women who keep them free, has been one of the most moving things as well that I've gotten to see. My point here in all of this is that no matter where you are, One person can make a difference. And even though rural America only makes up about 17% of our population, we supply almost half of our armed forces. There are so many heroes living amongst you. Don't be afraid to get to know them. Thank you so much, Doug Harbour, for your tremendous service to our nation, both in Vietnam and once you returned here the rest of your life serving our country. Thank you to the many quilters who have joined in this effort making these beautiful quilts to present to our veterans. Thank you to our schools and our kiddos for getting involved. I'm so honored I got to spend some time with Doug Harbour. Thank you, Doug, for sharing your story with us. Thank you for sharing your patriotism. Thank you for serving your country. On behalf of everyone here at The Real Rule, we want to say thank you to all of our veterans, and every day is Veterans Day. Yes, and I know my mom would be embarrassed just to hear all your, glorious words, because she just does it to help the cause of patriotism.
Yeah, she does. She's a good lady.
But your efforts in this whole thing, I know from having heard her say it many times that, this wouldn't be possible without you. And you're the one, you're the tip of the spear that goes into the schools and gets it orchestrated. And you are such a force for our country, even now.
Yeah.
Even at 80 years old.
I tell you
Many
what.
can't keep up with you. I don't know that I could keep up with you.
Well, I guarantee you, lady. Yeah. I told my grandson, I said, you move real fast. Your dad can run pretty fast, but Pappy has one speed. I'm half fast Pappy. Yeah, so that's where I'm at.
Well, Doug, thank you so much for coming on today. I just want to say on behalf of everyone out here watching, thank you for your service to our country, not only in Vietnam, but on your return here to America and your whole life through. We just can't tell you how much we appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Claire. And anybody that, if you're listening, try and get it started in your community. Get something going. You can do it.
Amen.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close?
No, but all the kids involved set goals.
Yeah.
Set goals. Because I learned this in the Marine Corps, the only limiting factor is right up here, is if you let yourself quit. You may have roadblocks put up.
Yeah.
But you can go around those roadblocks and get what and just set your goals. Yeah. Amen.
Amen. Doug, thanks so much for coming on.
You betcha, Claire.
We
Thanks for
appreciate
listening to this old man yak.
Oh my goodness. Anytime. We'll have to do this again.
Okay, you betcha, anytime.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. We'll see you on the next one. Adios.